Thank you, Trish. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've had a nice lunch and a nice stroll around the posters. I'm talking to you this afternoon about something that was born from a personal experience, and I think with a lot of our research projects, it is exactly that. The title is, But Do You Have the Courage to Teach? And it's the kind of unspoken question for me that is sort of hanging there when I interview trainee teachers who are coming onto initial teacher education programs. And as I go through this, I'm sure you'll see why. So it's an investigation into the purpose of initial teacher training programs. What is the purpose of these programs? So just to give you a very quick introduction to who I am. I came into teaching in 1999 as an in-service teacher trainee, as some of my teacher trainees are at the moment. And during that time, I worked largely in sixth form colleges, but also in general FE and some schools as well. And I taught, I was an English graduate, I am an English graduate, and during my whole teaching career, I have probably taught English for about 5% of that. And that's been out of choice, actually. I taught art for nursery nurses, having not done any art since I was at nursery probably. I taught film studies, media studies, the music industry, key skills communication, who remembers that? And what happened was, I carried on in this way, and in 2012, which was kind of the beginning, at least for kind of sixth form colleges, that wave of cuts and reduction in funding and putting an extra teaching period into the day, I kind of hit a brick wall and I needed to stop, sit down and find the door again, if you like. And so this opportunity presented itself, which was taking voluntary redundancy, and I did. And I started to think about my career as a teacher, and I was a good stroke outstanding teacher for an outstanding sixth form college, and could pull out the really good lesson, but I had no tools really to deal with kind of this stop, this you take this VR and then kind of what next. And so I came across this book by Parker J. Palmer. I've pressed on too fast. And it's called The Courage to Teach. And this surprised me because it's this idea of having courage to teach that was quite new to me, very, very alien. And you probably can't see there, it says exploring the inner landscape of a teacher's life. I was stunned. It was like realising that you have a soul, even as a teacher. And then, this is the beginning of an abstract on Hargreaves' paper, and I've just highlighted there the words that struck me: the emotions of teaching and teacher development in times of rapid change, the emotional lives of educators. And this resonated with me, and on some level it was to do with the fact that I'd had quite a lot of courage to walk away from a stable job to nothing and take VR and all the rest of it without any sort of clear sense of what I was going to do next. A year later, after some supply work, sort of freelance work, visiting lecturer work at a university in the north, I landed with intention into the world of teacher education, and two things surprised me almost immediately. And the first of these was the profile of the in-service trainee teacher, normally adults coming into their second or third career, with the promise that this is going to be a secure and stable job, and also the curriculum itself, which didn't seem to be very responsive to actually what was going on out there. And by that, what I mean was, how were we equipping trainee teachers? How are we equipping trainee teachers with the tools to manage their inner landscapes in times of change? And what were initial teacher education programmes preparing trainee teachers for? And this was a real concern that I had. And so I set out, as we do, to kind of reflect, think about it, and then the RDF presented itself, and here I am. So these things here represent what a teacher has to deal with. Okay, now we're talking about trainee teachers. You know, we've got to show them the difference between a lesson plan and a scheme of work, the difference between writing an aim and an objective or an outcome. There is then this other extra layer of uncertainty that they have to deal with. Okay, change, cuts in funding, the culture of performativity and accountability. And so what? Well, the so what for me is, where does that leave the role of teacher training programmes? And how do we, as teacher educators, handle our responsibility to address kind of the educational values, the moral issues, the dilemmas, the uncertainties, the actual stuff that happens in the classroom? You know, are we equipped to talk about classroom management and behaviour management strategies when actually we don't come across 16-year-olds throwing chairs at one another, you know, or setting fire to something? And I know that sounds really dramatic, but it happens. And do trainee teachers have the character? Do they have the wisdom, the judgment to do the right thing at the right time? So this is my question, where was the character building coming in, you know, into the teacher training programme? I looked at Biesta's 3 purposes of education. This was kind of my key theoretical perspective, and the reason for this is Biesta believes that, and I agree with him, these 3 areas, socialisation, qualification and subjectification, should work harmoniously. They should work as a Venn diagram where they equally contribute to a programme or to the education of an individual. So socialisation, the values and attributes needed to practice something well. So in the case of trainee teachers, their teaching placements. So their mentor is very, very important for this aspect. Qualification, the technical knowledge, the writing of the aims, the objectives, classroom management, learning theories, all that sort of technical knowledge. And then subjectification, questioning the taken for granted. What did we do? What do we do to get them to sort of develop their own individual voices and their independent thinking skills? So, this was a pilot study. It involved a literature review, and some informal interviews were conducted with trainee teachers and teacher educators within my organisation. And the intention was really to gather perceptions on what trainee teachers were being taught, who or what they were being taught to be, and how they responded to Biesta's 3 domains. So, I won't read all of these out, but interestingly, you have to be robust in the first place because you're in the deep end from the word go. And I know teachers with years of experience who lack confidence and character, something about what's being modelled out there when they're in their placements. The teacher educators, I go through my own crisis of consciousness at times when there is so much change, and I wonder what I'm preparing trainee teachers for. I seek to empower, but this is often informal as an aside. So really what was coming through was that there were quite differing perspectives on the part of teacher educators and how the course is perceived. Because another teacher educator said, actually I teach them to become professionals. Very differing approaches to developing character, one very explicit and another sort of more implicit. And trainee teachers thought there was a real disjoint between theory and practice, and that developing character whilst on the course came more so through sort of informal discussions with peers and their teacher educator. So my recommendations for my team at least have been to make space for the affective domain. Okay, thinking more consciously about what we do with our curriculum to allow the space for this sort of development. How we can do that in a way that is collaborative and trial different approaches to develop the links between theory into practice. So what I found was the dominant domain was qualification, and I think getting trainee teachers prepared for a sector that is changing so very quickly, they have to be pretty robust, as one of my trainee teachers has said, but they also have to be well informed to survive that and to be able to question the taken for granted. Thank you for listening.